If you live in a rural area, you may have noticed that your overhead lines are going from the single conductors to a bundled conductor, and I thought it'd be worth taking a look at that. The original ones are usually bare copper, and despite the fact they look fairly close, they're about a foot or 300mm apart. In this case, we've got neutral, three phases, and probably a street lighting feed. And on the left, we've got what's called ABC, aerial bundled cable. So I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at that and see what it looks like. Let's start off with the bare conductors, the old-fashioned style. It's old-fashioned, it's not really old-fashioned, it's just a different style. And one of the main advantages of the bare copper is the simplicity, the low cost, although it is copper, which is now really expensive now thanks to people investing in it. Well done, everybody who invested in copper. But the other advantage is that because it's in free air, it stays cool. You know, it can dissipate heat into the air, and it just means that you can run it at a fairly high current. This stuff is actually showing signs. It's quite hard to bend. It feels really hard. That also shows up in the sort of discoloration. It looks a bit dark red here. It suggests that maybe a fault, this has been subjected to a fault somewhere, and maybe that's why I've got this bit here. And under fault conditions, it can cause the lines to get very hot until the protection kicks in. This is 7 strands. I would bend it up to show you. There we go. But it is quite rigid. It's quite hard. So the size, it's bigger than 35mm cross-sectional areas. It looks a bit smaller than 70 square millimetre cross-sectional area, so I'm going to go with 50 for this. Could be wrong, but that's my guess. And to keep these from making contact with each other, you typically have 4 or 5 of these conductors. You'd have a neutral, you'd have 3 phases, and sometimes a auxiliary feed, like, say, for instance, street lighting. And it depends where you are in the world, depending on which sort of the standard that your utility company adopts. But here in the Isle of Man, it's neutral at the bottom, the 3 phases, and then the top wire is usually the street lighting wire. The theory behind that, I think, is that if a vehicle hits the bottom wire, it's the neutral and it's safe, but if it breaks it, it's kind of bad news for domestic appliances, really. This is one of the spaces that keeps them from touching together, and if I measure this, it will be in inches because it's old school. From the bottom coil to bottom of coil is about 9 inches, so this is pretty much a 9-inch spacer. And to put this on, if the wire's already in place, you'd simply hook it over like that, and then you'd wind the plastic around the conductor. It's much easier for me doing it at the bench than it is actually doing it when the wire is taut, when it's supported at both ends, but that's fundamentally how it goes on. Then the next wire, you just wrap it round the next wire down. It just stops any risk of them touching. Galloping conductors is a thing, particularly in stormy places like the Isle of Man. It can make them bounce so high that they actually make contact and arc with each other. It's just, so this is kind of designed to protect against that. But this is made of plastic. Oh, there's a little text in it. PLP, preformed line products, I think that is. It does have the measurements on here. Diameter range, like 6 to 55 or something like that. I'm not sure. It's got the sort of just specifications for different size of cables. I guess that's ultimately the largest cable it's going to accommodate in here. It doesn't really give us spacing distance. Not that it probably has it in the code number somewhere. Not really sure. It might even be in millimeters. To connect onto this, if you've got if you're, say, taking a feed off it, you need crimps. But because you can't slide them over the end like a traditional single conductor crimp where you just sort of indent it in on a tube, you've got these crimps here as a couple of different styles, which have, well, this one doesn't have the paste in it, but I think it's had the paste in it. But they have a sort of a grease that I'm guessing is partly to help with the crimping process, but also it's going to probably squish in between the conductors and sort of seal out any oxygen to prevent corrosion. But the reason these are so thick is because ultimately they are open-ended, so you're going to put this over the conductor, you're going to get the other conductor in, and then these days you'd use one of the motorised crimping tools, the sort of handheld cordless ones, that you'd clamp it over it and it would crush this around the 2 conductors and bond them together. So this is being replaced by ABC, aerial bundled cable, or aerial bundled conductors. The two different names are used for the same sort of stuff. Have I covered everything I need to with that? I think I have. ABC. It is, just as it's described, it's a bundle of conductors, and in this case, we've got 5 conductors, we've got the neutral, we've got the 3 phases, and we've got the street lighting auxiliary feed. And these are aluminium as opposed to copper. That's purely a cost saving. Also, one of the things about the copper is that a lot of people die every year around the world trying to steal copper cable, and it's not very helpful when they break into yards and steal whole drums of this stuff. Copper has become a valuable material, unfortunately, because of the, yes, investors. This stuff has, you'll see that this is ribbed. It's firm and ribbed. The ribs actually indicate phase identification. So, for instance, the neutral has got ribs all the way around it. You can feel, as soon as you touch this, you know it's the neutral, and that's the point. It's identifiable even in inclement weather conditions and when it's dark at night. Phase 1 has a single rib on it. Phase 2 has 2 ribs, and this is actually phase 3. So where's phase 2? Phase 2 has the 2 ribs, and you can feel that. Even if I wasn't, if I, I'm not sure it works so well with gloves, but even if it was pitch black, I could actually identify that this is phase 2 just by touching it, and I could identify definitely that the neutral is this one. The reason the neutral has so many ribs is you really do not want to accidentally get the neutral onto another cable. I think in some versions of this, the neutral simply has no ribs on it, and it'd be so easy, particularly if this is under tension, to actually not be able to get them apart enough that you'd be feeling around it trying to find that groove. Particularly with gloves on again, it would run the risk that you'd think that one of the other ones that did have a rib in it was smooth, and you'd hook it across 2 phases accidentally. So the ribs all round is a good idea. I've guesstimated, because it's not written in this cable, I don't think, anywhere, that this is probably 95mm square millimeter cross-sectional area. And the auxiliary feed for the street lighting doesn't have to be so big. So it's probably 16mm cross-sectional area squared. And to connect onto these, you use an insulation displacement connector. And this basically just bites through the insulation into the conductor. And then you'd connect, say for instance, this is used, this is standard. Domestic electricians in the UK will recognise this as double insulated cable, and this is actually used to make connections onto these cables. So inside this, let's open it up completely. You have quite a lot of screws, lots of glue for a start. It's fairly hard. It's like petroleum jelly Vaseline, but it's really quite thick. And that is to seal, once these bite in, it's to seal oxygen away from the cables, just to seal them up completely. This little cup here is for the single-ended cable. This goes in, and actually the end of the conductors pushes into even more goo. Let's pull that out and take a look at it. It's a little cup of waxy goo. It is quite firm, he said. Poking his finger into it excessively firmly and it's squished everywhere. That's okay. So this little cup just sits into here, a little rubber cup. It's to seal off the end of that cable when it goes in. Noting that to get a good deep penetration of the jaws, I think it's recommended that you take the outer sheath off and just have an exposed section in here of the inner core. That does make sense because these teeth are designed to bite through a specific depth. And also, by the look of it, it's going to bottom out. So when it's tight enough, those teeth are going to be in a very specific depth, and then it's going to bottom out on the hard plastic here to stop it closing any further. So it's just basically designed barely to bite through the plastic. I wonder how that goes in different temperatures, because certainly in Scotland, and more so in Scotland than Isle of Man, the temperature can be, the temperature extremes can be a hot summer's day when it's like the plastic's going to be super soft, to a very harsh winter when it's going to be quite rigid. I don't know what the rules are regarding using this. And maybe I'd be a bit less confident using these on a very cold day. icy cold day, because I would think that maybe the plastic would be that bit more rigid that it was going to actually cause problems. So let's do this then. Let's actually put this on. So I'm going to choose to put this on here. I'm going to slip this in here. I'm just going to butt it into the gel so it squishes out. Place this over. It's keyed so it can only go one way round. Ugh. Let's get the bolts in. Let's get the bolts in from the other side. I've just done this wrong, haven't I? That's okay. It's my speciality. Worth mentioning, these metal plates are just purely for the clamping. They're not actually electrically connected. But if this is being done live, it would be done with gloves anyway, just because that's just the thing you do. Wouldn't really be wanting to do it with bare hands. So let's see how this goes. Let's tighten it up. I have a suitable ratchet. I've chosen a stubby ratchet because I prefer stubby ratchets personally. Because my hands are prone to breaking things with with the long handle ratchets. I can put a lot of force in things. Let's see if I'm getting this right. I'm just going to make double sure here that everything is going together properly. I wonder if the position of the rib really matters here. I suppose it doesn't really matter, because in the case of the neutral, it would be, you know, ribs all round. Ribs all round. So let's keep tightening this up, and you tighten it until it gets to the specific torque that the bolts will shear. And I suppose ultimately that's down to when the body actually bottoms out against the cable. So alternate tightening of the bolts. And theoretically, the tops of these, once it's tight enough, and it is taking a lot of pressure, that is more than enough to bite through the plastic, I would say, even in cold weather. I guess that's the point. Before the plastic bottoms out, and it should get to the point that these snap off. I'm getting a bit wary about them snapping off, my fingers smash into the other nut. Maybe the longer ratchet would have been a better idea. I didn't think this was going to be quite as forceful, but I've started, so I'll finish. And my hands are covered in grease, which doesn't help now either. That's good planning. So that one's sheared off. And that one's sheared off. So that's the connection made. You can actually see the grease has squished out. And the two halves have closed almost completely on quite a large conductor there. And that should be them electrically connected together. I could test that with the meter, but I'm just going to assume they are. Should I assume anything? Let's test the meter. It's not exactly going to be what you'd call a high current test though, is it? So, yeah, they're connected together. I should hope so, given that this is kind of expensive professional gear. So now it's broken off. There are little sleeves over this. Those kind of go onto a sleeve that goes over the existing nut, the shear bit. So it does make me wonder, what would it look like if I took that back off? Should I take it back off and take a look at the cables and see what they look like? I think we should. So I'm going to pause momentarily while I do that. Okay, we're ready to take it to bits. Things worthy of note. These things, although you're not supposed to take these connectors off, once you've pierced that cable, that's it. You're better just leaving this connector in place. The shear nuts are actually just a cap that goes over an existing nut. And that, once it's sheared, you can just take this sleeve off. This does allude to a certain place, a certain company, where the guys were not confident in the tension they got in these before they snapped, and did tighten them up further, and they did have problems with these. I'm not sure how reliable this stuff is. If you work in the distribution industry in other parts of the world, you can tell us in the comments down below. So I'm going to loosen this now, and it's very tight, but that's okay. It'll come out quite quickly, and we'll take a look and see what it's done to the cable, see what displacement there is into it. So that's it coming out quite fast now. and we'll see what this looks like. How squished the cables are. It's got plenty of length in the bolts to allow for awkward, you know, much wider sort of cable diameters. So let's lift this off. Oh, it's not lifting off that easily. Let's get a screwdriver into it. Is there anywhere to put the screwdriver? If I don't get this off in the near future, there it comes. Oh, that's bitten in quite deep. Yeah, that's displaced right into the cores. As you'd expect, given that that's what it's intended to, and one of the teeth has actually come out with that. It's notable that it's got the two much longer outer teeth and then it's got the two shorter inner teeth. There'll be science behind that, the way it actually bites into it. It really is. It's really bitten into that cable tight to the point that the conductors are actually gripping onto the connector. Let's wipe the grease off that and we'll strip it and we'll take a look at to see what it's done to the conductors inside. So give me a sharp knife. Ooh. I wish I had gone for it now. I was going to get one of the Gyak or whatever is it? Their maker knives. I really fancy the Durista one because I admire Jimmy Durista. I wish I'd done it now. I left it too late. They were all gone. Not to worry. That's what happens when you leave things too late. Oh, you can see it has bitten right into the copper conductors. We've got the full set of indentations here. That was quite a decent connection. I wonder what metal these are. Do they stick to magnets? Let's get a little neodymium boron magnet. No, they don't. I wonder what that is. Ah, this is where I'm going to have to go all Ave. I don't think it's aluminium. I'll scrape it. I'll do a sort of Ave thing and see if there's anything underneath. You know what, that is copper underneath, but it's a coppery colour. Is it a coppery colour or am I just... I'm going to scrape this a bit further. Let's get a file and do it before I just scrape my blade right through my finger. I tell you what, I'll pause while I do this because this is all covered in grease and that's not helping. And it's copper. Hard copper. I wonder if it's been heat treated to actually make it more sort of spiky. Slightly tapered at the ends with a sort of flattish blade and brought to that sort of chisel edge point. And then the plating, I wonder if the plating is anything to do with compatibility with the aluminium or they're relying purely on the grease for displacing any sort of risk of oxygen getting in. But certainly the aluminium one, it's bitten in thoroughly all the way around. You can see the teeth marks into it. So it's really made a good connection in there. That's good. Interesting. So yeah, pretty neat, quite interesting. I should mention that it's warm enough today as it is, but when I was tightening that up with the stubby ratchet, it switched my body up in gear. MD who's in the technical industries will know that when you stop working, your body will run at sort of full speed for a while and then it will just slowly ramp down. And I find that when I've been working for a while, like it's almost like time slows down because your whole body goes up a gear. When I tightened that up, I could actually feel the body just switched into turbo mode and the heating turned on and everything started. And the hands, I'm just like really hot now. It's just because that's what it is. It puts you into the sort of work mode. Interesting stuff. So that's those aerial bundled cable or aerial bundled conductors versus, I have to say incidentally, this is so light. Oh, you know what? How does it compare to the other one for length? It's a similar length, give or take a bit. I'm just going to go and weigh these and tell you the difference. Oh, that's strange. Pretty much the same weight, length for length. I'm guessing just it's the fact it feels so soft and sort of like larger diameter that it doesn't feel quite as heavy as the sort of sharper, thinner copper. But they are pretty much the same weight, despite the fact this has got the sort of thicker core and the sort of plastic insulation on it, the aluminium diameter. They've increased it because it compensates for the slightly higher resistance of aluminium over copper. It also means this is very strong, surprisingly strong. Talking to Kevin, he said they'd had things like they'd had spans come down with trees on them, and it had virtually brought it right down to the ground, the poles being bent in, but the aerial bundled conductor had actually held it. It's really strong that way. So interesting stuff, well worth taking a look at, and that saves you guys having to steal a cherry picker and go up and play with live wires to see what it looks like.